The most important thing that we do is kind of, we have to make decisions every day, right? That's what distinguishes one human from another. It's our how we respond to our environment. So something happens in an environment, and what we can do is we decide how we're going to respond to this, right? It rains, how do I respond? My flight's delayed, how do I respond? And that's kind of what distinguishes a human, right? It's your personality, it's your thought process, from a professional, personal standpoint. And there's a lot of key components that go into how we make decisions. The first is our short-term versus our long-term decision-making process. And so this is really important. So like just to give you just some context into how to think about this, like how many people think that their 7th grade exam was like really important today if you look back at that situation, right? That this is gonna really alter the entire course of the future of my life. Very few people, I'm guessing, right? I don't even know what exams I was taking in 7th grade. But the thing is, the night before that exam, you were panicking, right? You were stressed out, you were nervous about it, you had high energy, you were just like anxious. And this, by the way, will continue to happen in college and after college, before an interview, before an exam. You always think beforehand that the next thing that's going to happen is super critical and formative, and you stress out about it, and then 1 year later, looking back, you're like, oh my God, I stressed out about something not relevant. And that's basically an evolutionary physiological reaction that we have, that we just need to take note of, hey, our body has evolved in such a way, but it's not actually optimized for the way we exist and live today in today's world. It's just kind of an evolutionary trend. So you always want to think about how is this, what I like to do is, let me just project myself 1 year from today and look back at this situation, and that kind of gives you much better perspective in making a decision. All right, so the other points, time management. Time is like very scarce, obviously. Like time is the one thing you can't buy, right? Steve Jobs built probably the most impressive and revolutionary product in the history of mankind, right? But he couldn't buy more time when he got cancer, right? It was a very unfortunate situation. But you can never buy your time back. And so prioritization of time is critical. And that's one of the things that you're going to find, you find as a student, you find as you work. What are the things you're going to choose to spend your time on? Who are the people that you're going to spend your time with? So those are key decisions that you want to think about. And what you try to find is, like, one of the things I found is that you usually will adjust the weights of importance you assign to certain things as you get older, but it's always important to assess it, right? I'm spending time on these things. Are these things helping me in some certain way, right? And then this is important across your life, and I think that's critical. Okay. What else? Risk tolerance. Risk tolerance is also something that I think matters a lot. I mean, our generation, kind of the younger generation, tends to have much higher risk tolerance than previous generations. Previous generations were like, they get a job at IBM, and they stay there for 40 years, and then they retire. Our generation likes to hop around and move around, and so we have high risk tolerance in that capacity. But I think it's important to take risks because as we study in finance, risk and return are correlated. And so if you just kind of do simple and easy and straightforward things and you don't challenge yourself, it's very hard to make a lot of progress. You're only remarkable if what you do, it requires some remark. Someone's going to talk about it. It's different. It's unique. If you come in and you just do the same thing everyone else is doing, not to single out a lot of what happens at Penn, but at Penn specifically, everyone goes into banking and consulting, which is fine. But I think one of the key things is to say, well, everyone else is doing this, and what are the reasons I'm doing it? And if you can actually validate it and it makes sense for you, that's okay. But just think about that. Okay, mindset. Mindset is one of the most important things, I think, across just kind of continue throughout your life. And I think expectation management is something I learned from flight. So at work I fly a lot and I go around a lot. And what I realized was my happiness is not a function of what's happening to me. It is a function of how I respond to what's happening to me, right? And so if I set my expectations really low, then I'm going to be happy because nothing could be worse than like thinking the worst is going to happen, right? So example. I need to take a flight on a plane. I expect that the Uber is going to cancel right before he arrives, and I have to order a new Uber who's then going to be 12 minutes away. I expect that by the time I get there, there's going to be like rain and floods and traffic, and then when I get there, the security line is going to be really long. And then by the time I get to the plane, there's going to be something wrong in the plane that we're going to delay the flight. And there's going to be problems when we land, and we might have to detour. All these things, this is my expectation. So if that does not happen, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing. Like, and everyone's like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, I'm happy. So it's much better than what I expected. But this is, and what usually what happens when there's a delay, I see everyone else in line going crazy and feeding off of each other's energy, calling United Airlines, hi United Airlines customer support, this is ridiculous. And then the other person's shouting over them, and now there's a competition, you fuel off each other's energy. And I was like, guys, it's not that big of a deal, it's a 45-minute delay. I'm expecting a couple hours. It's just 45 minutes. And so it's all about expectation management. And so I like the quote is that it is not about everything that happens to you, it has to be perfect for you to be happy. For you to be happy, you just have to have the right attitude towards the events that happen, and if that's the case, then you're okay. This is, by the way, very hard to execute across all of life. I've done this reasonably well on flights. I am not anywhere near perfect, and I do have times where I set high expectations for the company, for the people I work with, and then I do get disappointed at times, so I don't want people to think that I'm not human. I am human, but I just try to remind myself when I fall into that trap that in reality you just need to set your expectations low and then you're happy. There's a good quote that says, desire is a contract that you have with yourself to not be happy until you attain whatever you should have in the future. But it's basically something along those lines. Confidence and certainty and balance. Okay, so confidence and certainty are probably some of the two most important things. They're basically very similar. That you have. If you come in to a meeting, if I'm interviewing someone and they walk in and they sit down, and sometimes I'll interview someone and they'll be talking to me and I'm like, this guy doesn't really, or this girl doesn't really believe in themselves. Like they're sitting there, I'm like, hey, what did you do? Like, oh, I did this project. And then I'm like, oh, okay, like what did you code up? And they're like, oh, I coded this thing, and then I'll start looking at what they did. I was like, wow, this is really cool. This is amazing. I'm looking at them, at what they do, but the way they talk about it makes it seem as if it's unimportant, or they themselves aren't confident in themselves. So it's very hard for you to really believe in someone if they themselves don't believe in them. Like if you don't believe in yourself, why should other people believe in you? So confidence and certainty are really important. And in the early days, especially if you're starting something new or taking a risk, you have nothing to bet on but your confidence. You have 0 customers, you have 0 case studies, and most people tell you you're stupid or you're crazy or this is not gonna work because most probably it's not gonna work. So what do you have? You have yourself, you have your confidence, and so that's really important to say like, hey, am I doubting myself? And we're used to doubting ourselves because most things are really hard. So you shouldn't doubt yourself. Balance is obviously very important. Because you don't want to get onto one extreme or the other extreme, right? If you're overly confident to the point where you're stubborn and you don't listen to anything anyone says, then you won't be able to self-correct. You should speak with customers, see what they actually have to say. Advisors are good and listen to them, but you always want to make your own decisions and kind of that separate balance. Okay, how am I doing on time? I'm good? Okay. I can talk for a long time. You guys should ask questions because I just can keep talking. This also controls me. I've gone through 50%, so it kind of controls me, limits how much stuff I can talk about. Okay, job search and sales. Okay, so a lot of people will come up to me and be like, hey, I really want to work in strategy. I was like, okay, what strategy? Like, what experience do you have in strategy? Like, I don't know, but I just want to work in strategy and like sit down in a corner office overlooking Central Park, and I want people to come and ask me questions and me to give them strategy. I was like, okay, so you're 21 years old, and I don't think a company is going to be like, hey, take this corner office and just sit there, and all the senior people in the company are going to come to you and be like, hey, can you tell us what to do for strategy? Yes, so let me tell you guys, that's not how it works, right? So you guys always want to set your expectations, referencing the previous part, and be realistic. Like, that's not going to happen. So what you should do is you should go into a company and be like, hey, what are the problems you're facing? Talk to me about what's going on at the company. Learn about what's happening in the company. Okay, there's a problem here in customer support. Okay, there's a problem here in sales. You have a gap over here in product. Operations, there's something wrong with the supply chain. Cool, I'm really interested in logistics. I think I can work with that. Oh, that's cool, I can help with that problem. So you're coming and actually solving a problem the company has. And as you do that, and you show that you're amazing, and you put in the effort, and do the things that might not look super sexy, then you might say, hey, can I just sit on that strategy meeting? I just want to sit in and listen on it, right? That's a much better strategy than coming in and saying, hey, I just want to do strategy work, don't give me anything else, and I'm just a strategic person, and please make sure I have a really nice office. It's like, you know, you want to make sure that the person listening to you is going to get some value from you, right? So you listen to what he has to say. And this ties into just traditional sales. A lot of the times when people come, I'm like, okay, you want to apply for a sales job. Sell to me what your last product is, the company you're currently at, how would you sell it? And they'll come and they'll start saying, oh my God, you should see these features. And they start listing out features. This feature, and 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 this feature. I was like, okay, how do people make decisions? People make buying decisions based on a few things. One is what other people are buying, right? If you see your friends buy something, you're going to make a decision to buy it, right? It's like a social proof, right? That's why restaurants will say, this is the most popular dessert, and everyone's going to buy that dessert. Because you say, oh, if it's most popular, other people are buying it, that means it's good, social proof, I'll buy it. It makes it easier for us to make decisions instead of us evaluating, you know, marginal benefit, marginal cost, utility functions, all that stuff. That's not how it works, it's social proof. Okay, so if that's the case, if it's making decisions based on social proof and based on emotion, then if you're actually going into a sales pitch, shouldn't you be trying to understand what's that person's emotional situation, what that person's needs are, and shouldn't you be talking about the benefits as opposed to the features? So if I come in and instead of saying, these are the 72 features I have, and let me list them to you, and let me also tell you the 42 features that we have on the product roadmap, you're going to fall asleep. That's not engaging, that's not relevant, right? That's also the reason why I talk about things relevant to you guys. I'm not talking about my product, because you guys don't care about my product. I talk about things, you have to see about things relevant to people and you get their attention and that's how you engage them. So if someone comes in and be like, hey, let me tell you about this product, but before I do, I'd love to learn a bit more about you. Okay, what are you doing? Oh, this is what you're doing. Oh, so let me explain to you the benefits of my product and how that's going to help these 3 problems you have. And then they might ask a question and be like, oh, how do you help me solve this problem? And you'll say, hey, because we have this feature. It's a very different way to say it. Okay, role and team. When making this, people say, oh, which company should I work at? I'm going to work at company XYZ, they have 17,000 people. Do you think it's a good decision? I was like, I don't know, they have 17,000 people. Who are the 4 people that you're actually going to work with? That's what matters when you actually go work at a company. It's not the brand. I think we have a huge overemphasis on brand name and an insufficient emphasis on what actually matters, which is who am I going to spend time with? Who's my boss? Who's my colleagues? They are the ones who are going to help you grow as a person. Right? Just putting a brand stamp on a resume actually doesn't matter. It's not that. I don't think it's super critical. I don't even know. There are people who work with us that I didn't know what they studied in undergrad. I'm not sure of their first job. But if they can talk about things intelligently and if they're smart, then I want them to be part of the team. So always make decisions based. Well, I would recommend you guys decide what you want to do, what makes sense for you. But my recommendation is, if the people that you're going to work with are brilliant, are people that you respect, are people that you think you're going to learn from, people who are positive people, who they're just going to give you positive energy as opposed to bring you down, those are people you want to work with. And the second thing is, what's the growth curve, the learning curve, right? Keep the learning curve steep when you're young. Instead of optimizing for short-term cash flow, I'm going to take the job that's paying me $3,000 more, take the job that's going to give you a steeper learning curve when you're young, because you're investing in your future. That delta in price, in cost, in salary is a long-term investment. So you don't want to always think about how am I going to get the most money now, it's how am I going to build myself and learn and build the skills that I think are relevant. All right, last thing, tech, future of jobs. Okay, are we going? Are you guys still have energy? Yeah. Last point, okay, all right. Tech and future of jobs. So artificial intelligence is basically the ability to, for computers, instead of having to code specifically how a computer should react or respond to a specific set of inputs, the computer learns based on historic data how to respond to a specific set of inputs and then responds on its own. Okay? The reason I wanted to talk about this is because it looks like the screen's gone, but it's totally fine. The reason I want to talk about it is because I think it's like during our career, technology is going to have a huge component and significantly change the way the economic landscape looks, the way our job market looks, and the way the roles and opportunities you have available will play out. So I think it's really important. And AI, I think, is going to be a big piece of that. And so at the beginning, what we're starting to see is specialized AI instead of generalized AI, right? Specialized AI is like, hey, this car can drive, right? It's probably not as good as you at cooking, but it's better than you at driving. It's specific one thing, so that's specialized AI. Generalized AI is like, hey, this is a machine that's smarter than you in like all features. And so the neural lace is actually very interesting. Has anyone heard of like neural lace? And these types of, well, okay, so this is forward thinking, but it's the idea that instead of having AI completely stand in robots, have AI augment your brain in a way where you either put something in your bloodstream, it goes into your brain, and then it allows you to augment your brain and actually kind of gives your brain much more capacity than the limited brain you have within your cranium, actually augment that capacity, right? And this is something people are talking about. It's still early, we're a long way away from really understanding how the neurons work, how the brain works, right? But this is kind of what people are doing so that humans stay relevant in the future, because we do have a very constrained brain. Like we have this neocortex has allowed us to really advance much more than other animals, but we are limited. And so this is a lot of things people are working on. It's super interesting. The problem though is that this is going to definitely replace a lot of jobs. And so just pure technical, jobs that are traditionally like, driverless cars obviously will take out drivers. Like that's the first level impact. Obviously it'll also take out parking lots because you don't need to park cars. Everyone who works in parking lots, that's going to change. It's going to actually change a lot of the way the city landscape works. It's going to really change a lot of the things that we take as for granted. And so what you want to be thinking about is like, oh, what are the types of things that are going to happen in the future if everything becomes connected to technology? Well, one is you're going to have a lot of data. Two is that the traditional types of roles that are going to be available, and like obviously the low-level jobs will go mainly, right? So like McDonald's workers and those people will go. The specialized jobs like accounting and tax and things like that, those are probably also going to go. So what's left for humans? And so this is going to be what we're going to start to see is things like universal basic income, right? We'll have to give people basic income so people stay sane, and then we have to figure out how to spend our time. And so there's going to be a lot of probably leisure stuff. And then there's things like blockchain and other things that are going to change the way we work. But the reason I encourage you to think about these things, and I can go on for a long time about the technology, and I don't want to do that, is just because I think that we will find that whichever role or job we're going to be in, the future of technology and the way tech will develop will severely impact the way it's run, the way it works, the way we think about it. And so I definitely encourage people to kind of just do some research into it, see how it's going to happen, and just be at least able to communicate and understand. All right? I'm going to stop talking and answer. If I have time for questions, I can do questions. Some time for questions? Yeah. Okay, cool. Questions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes?
So you talked about kind of like control expectations, like expectation management.
Sure.
How does that not lead into pessimism?
How does that link into pessimism?
How does it not lead? Like, can that make like a pessimistic person?
Yo, that's a really good question. Yeah, that's a really good question. So the question is, if you have very low expectations, does that make you pessimistic? I think we should have. I think that's a really good question, and I think it goes back to the point about balance. It's that you should, in your nature, be just a positive person, right? So if something wrong happens, you just perceive it in a positive way. It's raining today. I'm not like, oh my God, the weekend I come to Philly, it's raining. I was like, oh, it's fine. It's raining. I'll just have an umbrella. Just put an umbrella, right? So it's actually a positive approach because as a consequence of setting low expectations, you kind of see things positively. So I think that's true. And I do mention the balance point because it isn't as black and white as we would like. Really, if I hired a salesperson like, hey, please close 0 deals this month. They're like, okay, I can close 0 deals. That's low expectations, right? Or 1 deal, right? Then you can't. That doesn't work. So you have to have a balance in it. But yeah, I agree that it's really important to be optimistic and positive, so people enjoy working with you and you enjoy working with them.
I have a
Yeah.
question. It's a little bit more of a comment, but I was wondering if you can talk a little bit when you mentioned about the future of jobs and how technology is going to impact that in the future. Can you talk a little bit about maybe creative jobs and how that's an alternative? Because a machine is never going to be able to create. It's not going to be able to write a story. It'll do what it's programmed to do.
Sure.
And so I think that might be an alternative.
That's a good point, yeah. So far, machines haven't been really good at writing stories or poetry and things like that. There's been a lot of research going into that space, but we haven't found that it hasn't really worked out super well. There's like one or two companies that I know of, and there's probably a few that I don't know of that are working on that. I think in the creative space, what you started to see, I think in the early 2010s, there was a lot of emphasis in technology being a differentiator between companies. But then as technology became more and more commoditized in software, the actual key differentiating factor between brands is mainly design, right? So if I look at an application like an Instagram or a Snapchat or even the phone itself, the way it's designed is what really is what's going to be a differentiator, because the speed and the performance and all that stuff will become commoditized. And as those things get commoditized, what happens is they're no longer a differentiator, right? So memory chips and all these things and processors, that's just, you can make marginal improvements to it, but it's just marginal. And so as a company, you're competing in the industry, in the market, that's not going to be the differentiating factor. So I think design, and especially user experience, user interface design, that part of creative will be important for at least the next 5-10 years, because that's how brands differentiate themselves. If the way you feel, especially in fashion, right? Just the way you feel about a certain brand, obviously the look and the feel, those things are critical. Yeah?
First, thanks for the presentation. I like the last topic a lot. It resonates with me a lot. I have 2 kids.
Okay.
They're very young, and what really struck me is when I realized that when they're 16, they won't need a driver's license.
Sure.
And I think that that's just one example of multiple things they're going to change. So I'm struggling with what to tell my kids to study or what advice I can give them to grow and develop as adults. And the creative thing was something I thought of until I saw a TED Talk. And there was a TED Talk about something related to neural lace.
Yeah.
And really, it's not necessarily a physical connection to your brain thing. I mean, these phones are first starting
Sure.
the neural lace.
Yeah.
We see notification,
Triggers, yeah.
endorphin, things like that. So where should the future toddlers in America go?
Sure.
Because AI is going to learn faster than humans learn.
Yeah.
And the TED Talk was saying, like, we'll just give them parameters, and then they'll come back and tell me this is the design that you're looking for. And then you'll be like, oh no, I don't like it that way, do it this way, and then they'll go and do it again. So anyway, that's the future, and it's really concerning, because I don't know what the role humans have to play.
Yeah. That's a great question. How to educate kids? The easy answer is not what's currently happening in education, but that's the easy answer. The hard answer is what should they actually do? It's easy to criticize, but it's hard to actually come up with an alternative. I do think the way I think about it is, if you're what a kid needs to know how to do is he needs to know how to build, he or she needs to build good problem solving skills. So, break apart a phone and say, hey, rebuild the phone. How does each piece work? Understand how a car actually works, how a TV works, and excite their curiosity. When as adults, if someone rings the doorbell, you're like, oh my God, I have to stand up off the couch and walk towards the door. As a baby, when you first walk, you're like, oh my God, I just made a step. Oh my God, I just made a step. This is amazing, and that's because they have this perspective that's like, oh, not everything is mundane. They have this curiosity that they ask questions. And so I think the best way to teach people is to teach them to ask, or encourage them to ask questions. How does this work? Instead of saying, hey, don't do that, say, hey, you're sitting there on the top of that slide, there is a chance that you'll fall, and that fall is probably going to hurt you. It might hurt your leg and your arm, and that arm probably you're going to get screwed over for probably like 4 months. You're not able to move your arm, and you like to play basketball, so you might not actually be able to play basketball for a while. Do you think it's a good decision to hang there like in that position off that slide? Huh, good point. I probably shouldn't, because I want to play basketball. Let me move back. Instead of like, get down, stop, stop. You're just shouting at them, right? And a lot of people, the people in the other next to you look at you like, wait, why is this guy talking to their child like they're an adult? But treat them like an adult, speak to them, excite their curiosity. This is just, again, my perspective. Everyone does what they should think is right. But my perspective is like, hey, well, it doesn't make that much sense. So I think those are the types of things I would encourage. And then exactly how AI will play out exactly, I think no one really knows. I think in the short term, it's pretty clear it's just going to be specialist AIs. So there's going to be like a really good chef AI. A really good, obviously the driverless car has already kind of happened. And then it'll really be specialized. And I think generalized AI, we don't really see that happening in the next at least 5 years, but I don't even see it happening until at least the mid-20s. Yeah?
So you talk a lot about how AI advancing neuralinks and all of that is going to kind of take away jobs. There's also kind of the aspect of creating those.
Sure, yeah.
Woo woo! Psychology,
Yeah.
where you're a psychologist for people who have lost their jobs. So it's actually kind of interesting. It sounds ridiculous now, but like it's something that, you know, there's so many different types of things. It's just very interesting.
Definitely. You always should look at the net as opposed to just the gross. Yeah, you have definitely, from one standpoint, you have a loss of jobs. From the other standpoint, you have a growth because you have the people who are creating the AIs, right? There is a large coefficient. Like if you just look at factory workers, right? If the entire car manufacturing industry was automated, you're losing hundreds of thousands of jobs. And so the people building the AI are hundreds of jobs, maybe thousands, but definitely not tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands. And so you have an order of magnitude differential. Psychologists, that's one thing, obviously you have more psychiatry. The reason I talk about leisure is if we do have a lot of automation, that frees up a lot of our time. And so leisure and entertainment will grow. And so we'll probably spend time going into town halls and having a lot of coffee and like talking to other people about philosophy. Maybe there'll be a growth in philosophy, how we should live our life because you have more free time, etc., etc., etc. Do I have time for one more question?
Yeah, so we have time for one more question and then we're going to move on.
Cool. All right. Oh, okay. There's a lot of people have questions. Okay.
The girl in the back has been raising her hand.
Okay, go for it. The girl in the back.
Okay, that shows this tolerance point.
I can't hear you.
A lot of people express tolerance.
Stand up.
So you put a lot of people that kind of go into ID or consulting, and sometimes they don't really know why they're going into it. So I know that a lot of times are presented opportunities that seem like they touch someone else. So maybe it's not something that you directly are like passionate about, but for other people it's a great opportunity or a great starting point. So what do you think are like the main factors that one should consider when like they're deciding whether this great opportunity is one that they really want to do or not?
Okay. That's a good question. The 2 points I mentioned earlier I think also apply here, which is one, who you're going to work with, who's your boss, who are your colleagues, and actually have coffee with them. A lot of times people are scared in an interview process. They think it's a one-way interview. You should interview. Say, hey, I would love to speak with my boss. Can I have coffee with them? Hey, I would love to speak with the 3 people on my team, my coworkers at my level, and speak with them. And if you have people reporting to you, I would love to interview them. So that people are shy to ask that question. But as an employer, if someone asks you that question, you have higher respect for them. Like, hey, these people care about the things that matter. So that's number one. Don't be shy to when you're speaking with a recruiter or when you're speaking with the employer to be like, yes, 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 hire me, whatever. Yeah, no, that's not the right position to be in. So who you work with is critical. And if you like them and you think they're smart, I wouldn't more worry too much about like the job title. You know, hey, can I have manager at the end over here and lead at the beginning and maybe specialist? Okay, lead customer success specialist manager. Like that's not like super critical. The second point around learning, I do think learning is critical. And so if you're going to a company, and this is why during summer internships, especially if you're still in college, every summer I really recommend people do different things because this is the unique opportunity to spend 3 months just experimenting. And so I would recommend doing one sales job because sales teaches you a lot. You get shut down a lot, you get turned down a lot, and just humbles you. It teaches you how hard it is to actually sell and how to actually convince someone, and just to make even just to give you some money for some product. So I really recommend doing sales if you're still at Summers, and just to learn, right? So if you can grow, if you go to a company, small companies are great because of this. They're going to go in, they have so many needs, and they don't have people for them. And so they're going to give you an opportunity to say, hey, you're going to work a bit in marketing, but also we're going to need you to help us with some sales stuff. And you're probably going to maybe speak about with ops for a bit because we have a gap over there. And that's a good thing about small companies. So if you're focused on learning, I think going to a smaller company is good. If you're in a situation where you have a lot of loans and you want something stable, then a mid-sized or larger company makes a bit more sense than a 3-person company with no funding and no revenue. But there's always a balance. Those are a few points. Choosing the right job is always difficult. I would say it's always difficult. If you can get a sense of growth of a company, that's always good, because if their company is growing, you can project into the future that they're going to have a lot of, over the future, there's always going to be a lot of hiring positions, and so your growth isn't at the expense of someone else at a firm. There's just going to be new positions and new things to rise up into, as opposed to, I'm like dealing with office politics. I'm competing with these 7 other people to go from junior analyst to senior analyst. Those type of dynamics are just not that friendly. So thank you so much for listening to me ramble. I hope this was somewhat beneficial, but thanks a lot.